So good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday. This is Audrey Russo. Thrilled to be here and at another week of business as usual. Very excited about the two gentlemen that we have with us today. You can see that on our screen. We're thrilled to have Mike Green and Matt Harbaugh, who are the co-founders of Mountain State Capital, and we are going to dig into some of the work that they've been doing. But before we do that, I am going to set us up just to do a little bit of housekeeping and additional welcome. So first of all, I want to give shout outs to Huntington Bank and Sheets for their work in supporting us right from the, Huntington Bank has supported us right from the onset, and their work in the Small Business Administration has been monumental for the region and for small businesses. And Sheets has an innovation center here in Pittsburgh, and last Friday we actually had the Chief Operating Officer Travis Sheets on our show talking about what kind of innovations that they have been experiencing and planning, and very interesting dialogue, and they're going to continue to have significant presence in Pittsburgh. So that was really cool and exciting. So I just want to remind everyone that we have a great shows also lined up for the rest of this week, including having the president and CEO of Highmark Health. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to be hosting Brad Feld, who is another active investor in startups and has written many books and has been a pivotal part of the founding of Techstars and part of the what they call the mafia of AOL. So we're thrilled to have him. Every day we're adding new people, so stay tuned, keep this on your calendar. We have we've muted everyone just to make sure that we don't hear anything in the background, and then we also have a chat. And the intention is to ask Mike and Matt questions, and we'll make this as interactive as possible. So I'm thrilled. I'm going to jump in, and I'm thrilled to have the both of you here, Mike and Matt. And I think that we're going to have some fun trying to do a little bit of a dive in terms of what you both have been up to. I've known both of you for, I don't want to say how long, maybe it's a dozen years. Maybe Matt, you were back at Innovation Works and you were the chief investment officer back then. And Mike Green as a kindred spirit in terms of both being native New Yorkers, but really I've known him in the roles that he's been in terms of a contributor to the regional ecosystem, from things like the Power of 32, that was work that was led by the Benedum Foundation. And even as he's supported West Virginia, we have a relationship with WVU, and Mike has been instrumental in so many different aspects, both as an angel investor and being a mentor and making sure that tech companies around this region thrive and have investments. So we're pretty, he's also a previous, I would say he's like the fifth Beatle of Force Systems. And if any of you know anything about Force Systems, if you're old enough to remember that, I wasn't living here then, but that is one of the region's pretty remarkable success stories. And hopefully with the new work that Mike and Matt are doing, that we can have another Force Systems or two, and just based on their expertise. Matt has been actively involved in the West Virginia University tech ecosystem as well, trying to do a lot of innovative things down there. And so it's no surprise that Mike and Matt have formed a partnership. And I'm gonna jump in and just say, hi, Mike, hi, Matt. And why don't we start with Matt real quick, just to sort of set the table in terms of what's the work that you're doing. And hopefully I did a good enough job of describing where you've been and the work that you've done.
Great, thanks, Audrey. Yeah, and thanks for having us on. This is great. You have 60 participants. This is, I don't know how that ranks in terms of your other guests, but we're pretty happy about it.
No, we're excited to have you on.
So yeah, Mike and I started Mountain State Capital. We actually, leading up to when it actually launched, it probably took us about 3 years to get it off the ground. But we made our first investment out of this fund in late 2018, so just about a year and a half ago. And since then, we've invested in 13 companies. We've got another 2 that we're looking at right now. Hopefully we'll be up to 15 without, before the end of the summer would be my hope. Mm-hmm. The companies are, about 70% of the companies right now are in Western Pennsylvania, about 20% are in West Virginia, and then there's another 10% that are scattered around in other places. We call the region that we're looking at, we call it Greater Appalachia, or if you're in Pittsburgh, you call it Greater Appalachia. We look at it as sort of Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio, south to Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee. We think there's a lot of really great, innovative new startups in that region. There's not a lot of venture capital. And so in a lot of cases, we find ourselves coming into the earliest rounds. Usually it's typically a seed round where we may be the only fund in the round, and we're co-investing with angels and other individuals from around the community. But because Mike has lived in West Virginia now for, I think, 20 years or so, he has a great network there. I went down and worked there for about 5 years. So we have a really good set of relationships in that region. We've both been very active in Pittsburgh for more than 20 years. So we've got good relationships here, and we've been trying to broaden that network to include sort of all those other areas in the region that we're focused. But, it's a good time to be investing in this region in general.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Thank you for your continued leadership and commitment to this region as well. It's been noteworthy, and you've good exposure to the ecosystem. So let's just jump to Mike real quick. Mike, sort of tell us a little bit about you and your journey in terms of where you've been and how you got to where you're doing right now, and why are you living in West Virginia?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. Great opportunity to talk to your audience today. Thank you for this real opportunity. We appreciate it. Yeah, Matt and I have known each other for a number of years. Of course, I was on the board of IW for a number of years when Matt was the chief investment officer. Right. And we reconnected after he sold his company to Facebook a number of years ago. And I kind of hoodwinked him into coming down to West Virginia, and he's been the person who kind of transformed a lot of the opportunities at WVU in terms of entrepreneurship and the research board and all sorts of other transformative type of things that he was able to do. So we reconnected. We had started an angel fund back in around 2013. So Matt and I ran that for a while. And of course, a lot of the work we've been doing over the last several years has been missionary work, really just trying to educate the community, especially down here in West Virginia, not as much in Pittsburgh, about the asset class that we're focusing on, which is really the seed and early stage entrepreneurship class, where we believe that there are tremendous opportunities. And for me personally, this is all I've been doing for, believe it or not, for the last 41 years. I've only worked for or with early stage and small companies. Of course, you talked about the Four Systems experience, and yeah, we'd love to have more of those, Audrey. That was a great experience. But I know I learned a lot of lessons there, and try to teach those kind of things going forward to the entrepreneurs and young people that we see in our universities, to show them the right way to build a company and the appropriate way to deal with customers and personnel and the people who work for you and everyone, because that's a big part of, I think, the successes that I know we've had. It's all about people. People who've seen me speak before, people think it's about bits and bytes and tech and dollars and cents in finance. It's always about flesh and blood. It's always about how you treat your people and having good focus on the opportunities that are in front of you. So that's what I've been doing. I've also figured out a way over the last several years to merge my interests in entrepreneurship with education. So I still am part of the Pittsburgh community in terms of Remake Learning Council with the great Greg Baer and great people like Jim DeNova, and also served in West Virginia here as the president of the state school board for a number of years. And it's, in my opinion, it's all connected. If we have good education, and then we probably, and I'll say this in a selfish way, if we educate our people appropriately and correctly, we'll have good entrepreneurs that come out of that. And it means more opportunities for us at Mountain State Capital, and the opportunity to create jobs and to create great companies in the overall region.
So when you both talk about, obviously everyone can hear the depth of your experience in this region, as well as experience with startups and building companies and having exits. What do you look for when you say you talk about people? And I'm asking that to both of you, because Matt, you've been immersed in the, working in IW at a time, years ago, where there still was a lot of activity and a lot of need for money. Whether that's early seed or not. And Mike, I've introduced you, and the Tech Council's introduced you to lots of companies that you haven't invested in for one reason or another. But talk about what you look for, because everyone says it's about people. What does that really mean? So I'm talking
it's sometimes difficult to really define that, Audrey. Sometimes I do it in a very, very general way and say we like to deal with people who get it. And there's an old expression that says people who don't get it, don't get it. And sometimes it's, after a while, it's instincts that you're dealing with people who are, in particular as it relates to entrepreneurs, people who are coachable, that have good listening skills. Because none of us have done it right all the time perfectly. We've all made mistakes over the years. But we do look for people who are at least open-minded to look at different ways of doing things and do things the right way. And that's one thing that I preach all the time, is that, the appropriate way to do business. And we look for people who are indeed coachable with good listening skills. So that's number one that I think is the most important thing.
Okay. What about you, Matt?
I'll add on to that and just say, I think that, in general, I think it was Frank Demler who used to have this saying where he would say, when it comes to breakfast, a chicken is committed to breakfast. They're going to supply the eggs, but the pig is really committed. They're all in. And I think that, we want to know that the teams that we're getting in bed with are all in, that this is not something where they're trying out entrepreneurship on the side for a little bit and they can go back to something else if this doesn't work. I mean, in this fund, Mike and I have our own money in this fund. We've dedicated, years and years and years to get to this point. And we want to work with people who have that same drive and, who really couldn't do anything else. Maybe they've got great backgrounds. They could do hypothetically anything, but this is what they're going to do come hell or high water. Whether you're investing in them or not, they're going to make whatever they're doing a success. A lot of times it also means, more tactically, that these are people who understand their market very well. So, a lot of times you'll see entrepreneurs who recognize a need for whatever they're building because they've lived in that industry for 10 plus years. And they not only know the need for it, they have the professional network around the country to make sure that they're able to get in and get the sale. They know the right decision makers in the industry, and that can make their company a success. And so then we're coming along and providing, some funding and some sort of general startup and financing knowledge, but they really have to be the industry experts. We can't bring that piece to the table. We do try to augment our own expertise by surrounding ourselves with people who are leaders in their fields from around the country. I think one of the things that we've seen over the past couple of decades is while we do have great technologists here in this region, a lot of times they're not connected to the leaders in their own industry at a national or global level. And so when Mike and I put together this fund, one of the key things that we wanted to do is, we thought of it in terms of, we wanted to be connected capital. So we wanted to provide money, but we also wanted to provide connections to different industries that could be really useful to the entrepreneurs. I know this is something that you work at a lot at the Tech Council. So we put together an advisory board for our fund that includes, because we knew we were going to be generalists in terms of industry sectors, we tried to pull a variety of people together. We have the former president of Allergan Pharmaceuticals. We have the former CEO and current chairman of Intuit Corporation, big software company. We have Ray Lane from Kleiner Perkins, who also used to be president of Oracle.
Right.
I mean, we have, over a dozen of those types of people. All of them are from this region. Originally, they grew up here, and then they went on to be, in many cases, CEO or chairman of some of the largest companies in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
But they see this as a way to stay connected to the exciting things that are happening back here.
And they're advisors and investors?
That's right.
Okay, so they're both. Okay. So, it's one thing to say that you have all the competencies that you've talked about, and that you're really looking for, Mike. So it's the people, it's the knowledge in the domain. You could see that in some of the companies that you've invested in. Do you want to talk about any of the companies? Are there any companies that you feel comfortable sharing and talking about, whether they're Pittsburgh based or not?
We can talk a little bit about it. I mean, back to the qualities of some of the people that we're dealing with and working with. I mean, we really do focus in on making sure that the company does have a good CEO, a good leader, because that person obviously has to do two major things. They really have to build a team. So they have to be very, very clear as to what they know and what they don't know, and to make sure that they bring people with them that can complement their skills. But the other big part of being an entrepreneur and creating a company like this also includes the ability to raise money, which is very difficult. We spend a lot of time, obviously, focusing on raising money on our own behalf for our fund. But once we invest in a company, there's almost always an opportunity and a need to raise additional capital. So you're talking about hiring CEOs or dealing with people who have to have multiple skills. And that's why I go back to the issue of having people who are coachable, because none of us really have all those skills. So you should be aware of the fact you've got to come up with the opportunities to complement your skills with other people. In terms of companies that we invested in, we're proud of them. I'll pick out one. One of the companies that we invested in very early, one of our first, was a company called PecaLabs here in Pittsburgh.
Sure.
And we're excited about it. I had a personal connection to that because I have a granddaughter who had heart condition. She had to have open heart surgery. And some of their solutions, of course, involves the ability to come up with material that can grow with the child. It may not become as a surprise to anybody, but children grow. And as they grow, of course, there's a need for the material that's perhaps been implanted in their body and through surgery to also grow. So they've got some very unique IP in that respect. But the company's well run, very, very careful about where they spend their money. And they're doing things that I think are going to be very revolutionary in the medical field. So that's a company we're very, very comfortable about. We've actually increased our investment in that company recently, and happy to be part of that particular growing company here in Pittsburgh. That's a terrific opportunity. So that's an example. Matt, you want to talk about any of the others that think the audience might be interested in?
Well, I saw that we have at least two of our portfolio CEOs on the line. So,
okay.
We do.
So I definitely want to call out UpContent as being a great company here in Pittsburgh that's doing content curation. So Scott Rogerson's on the line here. Really exciting company, and I think Alicia McGinnis. I saw Alicia there. Alicia's a co-investor with us in UpContent. That's a great story of a company that I think it's the type of entrepreneur that you see in Pittsburgh. Somebody who really understands their market, has built a good technical solution, and is not, a lot of times you hear these stories about these companies in California where they immediately go out and raise tens of millions of dollars. I think what we see more often here in Pittsburgh is they raise a little bit of money, they prove it out, they get to that next stage, and then they raise their next round, but it's never overspending, and it's never just going hog wild on something. It's much more thoughtful. And I think Scott is a perfect example of that type of entrepreneur. He gets it done every day. He really understands it. He's on the phone with his customers all the time. He really understands what they need, and he's making sure that he builds the product that they're going to pay for. And then I think I saw Kim Ford was on the line from COEO. And so I know you've had Kim present in this podcast before. So, that's another company. It's software for the real estate industry, commercial real estate. And there, I think, it's interesting just to see the changes in that industry in general that COVID is causing. I mean, if you think about what's happening with, you know, office real estate leasing, it's a difficult time for that industry. And so it's been interesting for me to see how Kim and her team have looked at these changes in real time and are really having to adapt their thinking and think about the product that they're offering so that it's the right technology for the future of that industry.
Well, that's a good example. COEO is a good example of someone who has deep domain expertise.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a problem that she had a lot of competencies in trying to disrupt. So that's a good example. That's a seasoned person.
And we use UpContent on our website as well too. It's pretty cool stuff. We like it.
So what do you invest in this term called social entrepreneurship?
So, you know, I think first and foremost, it has to be a good business. You know, our investors are looking for us to make them money. Mm-hmm. So we have to make money with our investments. That being said, if the company and the product also happens to be good for society, it's a win-win. I would probably say that we wouldn't put that ahead of actually making money, or else this would be our first and last fund that we'd ever be able to raise. But it would be great if we had some companies that are doing good things. I think, you know, the company PecaLabs that Mike mentioned, I mean, that's improving the lives of pediatric heart patients. Is that social entrepreneurship? Maybe not in the sense that the listener is referring to, but I think a lot of the companies that we invest in have some type of a social benefit. Well,
but, you know, Pittsburgh has struggled. So I'm going to go back to Mike real quick. And I know, Matt, you have experience in this as well. But, you know, we, in terms of what you would call like our tech, you know, ecosystem, you know, we don't have a huge number of active investment, you know, in terms of VCs. We really don't. And 70% still of the region actually has investors from outside of the region. And so what are the pros and cons of that, particularly as we look ahead? We don't have a lot of, you know, you both have said you found some really great companies locally and you're really excited by that and you've made a significant amount of investment. What do you think about the lack of in terms of capital? And obviously now during COVID, I don't know if that's exacerbated it or it's increased it. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Mike? Frankly, I'm very surprised by that, Audrey, to be honest with you, because we live in this community and we see opportunities all the time. Maybe it's part of our problem. Maybe we haven't marketed ourselves as well as we possibly can. But Matt and my strategy is really to be able to syndicate this to the coast when necessary. Mm-hmm. But let me make this very, very clear. I think to be an investor in this kind of asset class requires you to have the ability to be there. We do not think that West Coast or East Coast VCs really do a really great job when it comes to dealing with some of these companies, because we think and believe very strongly that venture capital is a local sport. You've got to be there and you got to roll up your sleeves with the entrepreneur every single day. And that's in our DNA. That's what Matt and I do all the time. Right. So I'm very surprised that we don't see more people coming in. I think that's going to change though, Audrey. I think that they're seeing that there are opportunities all throughout our region. You know, Pittsburgh being pretty much the hub, but there are great opportunities also for us in West Virginia, in Western Virginia, Eastern Ohio, and so on, which we're all part of the same community. You made me think about the power of 32 when you mentioned that earlier. I completely forgot about that, which just, we knew back then, it's a regional issue. You know, I always call Pittsburgh the bedroom community of Morgantown, okay? But, you know, especially now when you see that people are able to work remotely, they're going to choose places where they want to live as much as where they want to work. And that may be something that's going to change here in our region as people perhaps may be moving, and I hate to say this to my friends in the city of Pittsburgh, but in general, people are going to migrate out to the suburbs for a variety of reasons, to places where they can work and play and deal and see and work in places that they're more comfortable to being at. Now, that's a big issue in many communities because of simple things like rural broadband and things of that nature. But this is all going to change over the years. And I think venture capital in general will find good deals. we're just delighted that we are have an opportunity really to focusing in on the great universities that are in our community, which breed tremendous opportunities for all of us who are investors. But we want to broaden that and also have the ability, since we have great contacts on the coast, to bring in additional venture capital as these companies grow.
I know, I think it's exciting. I also think what's interesting is that you haven't really picked a market sector. And right, Matt, is that correct? You haven't, I wouldn't say that you have a market sector preference. I mean, just by talking about PecaLabs versus, a COEO or ANGLR or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. And I think some of that goes back to both Mike and my history with Innovation Works, and just the fact that that was a regionally focused, and still is regionally focused seed fund. It's not market or industry specific. I think just with that background, that tended to be how we look at things. We want to find the best startups in this region. We probably have room in this portfolio for maybe 25 companies. So, we have about 10 left to go that hopefully we'll find over the next 18 to 24 months. But within that, if you're gonna draw a circle around a region, I think it makes it really hard to then say, and within that circle, we're only going to invest in robotics or med devices.
Right.
I think you want to say, we're going to invest in the best companies in this region, and we're going to work to connect them to whoever the experts are outside of the region that are most useful to them. So we spend a lot of time networking with larger companies and executives from Fortune 500 companies around the US to say, okay, would this person be willing to be an advisor or mentor for this company? And I think it's a lot of the same type of things that you do, which is what we need here in Pittsburgh. And by the way, back to your other question about investment capital in the region. When I started at Innovation Works in 2001, that was my job for the first 4 years I was there, because I came out of investment banking, so I knew how to raise money for companies. And they had me just traveling the US to try to meet venture capital firms from around the US who would be willing to invest in a Pittsburgh startup. At that time, people didn't even connect the fact that Carnegie Mellon was located in Pittsburgh. They would say, oh, sure, Carnegie Mellon, sure, they have good technology, but what does Pittsburgh have? And so it took a while, and it was only by showing them the quality of the startups that were coming out of this region that the out-of-town investors started to really become believers. I almost feel like now they're ahead of the game, and it's the out-of-town investors who, especially for anything related to the areas that we are very strong in, AI, robotics, things like that, they're jumping in and they're investing in these companies. And I think we as local, people here in this region, we need to believe in ourselves a little more, because I think other people are starting to see how good we are and that we can compete with companies anywhere.
Well, that Matt, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we need to talk about, that's a whole nother show, because a lot of what you're saying still haunts us. And I think that your work over time has definitely moved us forward, but we still have the legacy of that, whereas Pittsburgh. And even though we've gotten tremendously better over the 20 years. So Diane Sturthouse, who's from the Office of DCD, is asking if face-to-face is critical to funding companies given the limitations of COVID. Would you ever fund anyone that you haven't met face-to-face?
We're about to here pretty soon. So that would be a yes to that one.
That's good. That's good.
And hello to Diane.
That's great. And then, you know her, right?
Yes.
And so what about investing in pre-revenue startups?
That is also a yes. We've invested
that all the time.
Many of them.
Okay, good. So then, Jonathan, this last one is Joseph Connell.
Yeah, more of a comment there. So Matt, this is Mitch at Penn State. Yeah, invented, discussed his human skin substitute startup. Although he has not met Mike, we've had a hard time following up. He's a 2-time WVU grad, so I think you guys need to hook up after this.
So that's a reach out. That's a reach out. So if there's a way for people to reach out to you Should they just go to your website?
Yes, we have a form on our website you can fill out, but really the best way, because we do get a lot of inquiries over the transom. As you can imagine, there's so few investors in this region.
Right.
We just get inundated with inquiries. So really the best way is if you know another entrepreneur who we've invested in, if you're friends with someone that we've already invested in, use them to get a warm intro, or any of your service providers. Mike and I have been here in this region for so long that most lawyers, accountants, and bankers seem to know us and have our numbers. So, you know, those types of connections, that's the value of being in a relatively small region where the social networks are so, you know, well established and connected that you can easily get to us.
So what about those people? Because I believe that the future is entrepreneurs that are going to build tomorrow, right? It's not the big companies, it's the ones who are building the companies that we don't know about. What is your advice about people who are thinking about this, about wanting to be an entrepreneur? You've talked about what you look for in terms of grit, expertise, and determination. What's your advice for those who might be more green than some of the ones that you invest in?
My answer to that would be, if you have a passion for something that you really want to bring to market, you will find money someplace. But that's also one of the first things we look for, as Matt mentioned it earlier. If you're all in and you have passion, you will find a way. But we also always encourage people to do their homework. I mean, to really look at what they want to do and check out whether or not there really is competition. I have rarely ever seen anyone come to us who hasn't really thought about these things, but I suggest that, have you thought about the fact that there's probably somebody just as smart as you are, and they're living in Silicon Valley, have the same idea. Don't think you're that smart. But that's also a test of the individual. If they're that cocky and that arrogant, they think they're the first one to invent something, they're probably wrong. Doesn't mean that they haven't built a better mousetrap, as they say. But my feeling is that we meet so many great entrepreneurs who have great ideas and really think that they have something special. And my final comment is that, yes, if you have a passion for something, find a mentor, find people to talk to, get aggressive, and try to find a solution, and try and find money to fuel your particular passion. Don't give up. Never give up.
So Matt, any closing words?
I would just say, you know, I'm assuming most of the folks on the line are in Pittsburgh, or at least in Pennsylvania. I think, you know, take advantage of the resources that are here. We've got, you know, there are organizations like Innovation Works, Alpha Lab, other nonprofits here in the region that do put money into the earliest stage things. Take advantage of that, but also look beyond this region. We've found a lot of companies that have gone through accelerator programs, and they're not always local accelerator programs. Sometimes there are very industry-focused accelerators out there. We have a couple of companies that have been through the Amazon Alexa accelerator in Seattle, and they didn't move to Seattle. They just participated in that program. Now they're benefiting from the fact that they have those relationships to Amazon. We've seen companies that have gone through mobility-focused accelerators in Detroit, and you get such great industry contacts from these things that, you know, I'd say for a very brand new tech company, figure out where the people in your industry are clustering and make sure you meet all of them. You want to come to us with your list of contacts and that Rolodex from your industry, so that it really convinces us that you have the ability to succeed.
That's great. Mike, do you have any wrap up?
Yeah, my last comment would be this. It's very important for us to keep our people here, especially our young people. You guys have done a really great job with the Pittsburgh Technology Council of marketing the Pittsburgh community, and we're really greatly appreciative of that. But in this entire region, it's just a tragedy that we see a lot of our young people who get educated here, who have tremendous skills, and they migrate to the coast. We can't do that anymore. We need to build a greater infrastructure here of great companies, especially tech companies. And frankly, there's technology involved with everything we do today. So there's always a technology element of that. But the last thing we need is an immigration or people leaving our communities when we should be encouraging people to come back. I mean, in the four system story, I tell this all the time, we encourage people to come back from California. Frankly, I lied to many of them, told them there's a great number of companies here, don't worry about it. There'll be great opportunities. But here we are almost 30 plus years later, and look what we've created here in the metropolitan Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia area. Great opportunities for people to have multiple opportunities to go to different places, which is okay. Okay, you can change your jobs, that's okay. They do that in Silicon Valley all the time. You can change jobs without moving your car. But we can do that here in our region as well. And so it's really important for all of us to really encourage our people to be creative, to create great companies, be entrepreneurs, and stay here in this great metropolitan area that we call home.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for those words, and thank you for someone who's actually adopted this region and wasn't born here. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike. Your contact information is available. Anyone can reach out to you. There's a form on the website, and they're working diligently. And it's pretty exciting in terms of the work that you're doing and those that you're investing in, and your advice is priceless. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to remind everyone that we're here every day at noon, talking to people like Mike and Matt and others who are actually working on ways of changing Pittsburgh or addressing the issues that are affecting us during COVID. I also want to remind everyone that tomorrow, in addition to the noon Zoom, we also have a 2:30 Chief Marketing Officer session that is going to be really focused on building community as a marketing strategy. So we have people from the Steelers, Trinity Health, and Director of Community Engagement at Duolingo. So we're pretty excited about continuing those kinds of conversations. COVID or not, we're still plowing ahead. So I want to thank everyone. Thanks, Jonathan, for being here today. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Matt and Mike.
You guys.
Thank you.